great.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Holonet Runners podcast and Holonet Runners Live. That was our lovely new intro we made for the finale.
Thank God we're only using that once.
Only one time. I'm
way to make it
AJ,
sooner.
joined here by my bombad Mandalorian apostates.
Ooh, that's us.
Ooh, but
Uh-oh.
we're on our way to the living waters of Mandalore, so our
Wow.
guest can be happy with us. Emily Swallow, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Of course, yeah, we're thrilled to
Hooray.
talk about
Absolutely.
many things with you. So,
Yeah.
I'm still sort of getting my voice back from Celebration 2 weeks ago.
That's very
Oh, I
fair.
bet.
That's very fair. But yeah, people are probably wondering like how we were able to get you for our show, and there is a backstory to that with you and Jack. So, Jack, I don't know if you kind of want to tell this, or you and Emily tell it, because obviously it's your story. So,
Well, yeah, we can certainly. I think it's certainly
We can
best to
tag
tell it
team.
together.
There
You
we
got
go.
it. I remember when I first went up to just like say hi and everything. I had noticed that like a fan, like she had a fan made hammer there, and at that point, when I saw it, it was duct taped, and so it had been through some stuff, and it happens. Like that's the challenge with props. And I saw it, and I was like, I was in my armor at the time, like for context. And I was just like, I know I can do something like that for her. So I was like, Emily, please just let me make this for you. I have extra paint. Like that's the most expensive part. Yeah, and then I sent it to her, and that was that.
Well, hold on. Let me interrupt you because we did
Please,
talk
go ahead.
through. So I had been traveling with this hammer to conventions. I used to travel with a helmet that a fan had made me, but it turns out like that's really a pain in the butt to travel with all the time. And so I started traveling with this hammer because it was a great thing to have at my table for photo ops, and also especially like with little kids. Like if the little kids were shy, like you just give them the hammer and they instantly melt, or if they're misbehaving, you give them the hammer and they calm down a little bit. You don't hit them with the hammer. And so I said to Jack, I was like, I love having this hammer, but it had broken in my suitcase. And so I was like trying to masterfully, like, put my hand over the duct taped part. And then I would tell people, oh, well, yeah, it broke when I was beating up some stormtroopers. But it was really janky. And so Jack told me that he could make one, and he could make it so that it would hopefully not break in my suitcase, but would also be lightweight enough that it wouldn't, totally weigh down my bag. And so I was very intrigued, and I said, yes, please. And then he did indeed do that because he is very generous and crafty.
That he is.
Yeah. And so like that like was a very delicate process, because when you have a hammer like this, like how do you lay it so that it doesn't, the paint doesn't like stick on certain surfaces, or like whatever you have it laying on. So I remember that like it was like Thanksgiving time. I was like very carefully trying to get that right, and like it was cold out, so I was like, oh man, that paint could react bad at any moment. But it all went well, and it was so exciting to see that. Like when I see fans with photos of you, it's like I made that, and it's just such a great feeling to have that connection. And that was like enough for me. And then I remember lamenting that I didn't have enough time, or my sewing machine was so out of whack. I was like, I wanted to make a bag for it. So like I was like, oh man, I remember the rough dimensions. I'm gonna make a bag, and I know she'll be at Rhode Island Comic Con the next year. And so I made that. And so when I went to stand in line, I was with my girlfriend Abby and her Cara Dune, and I was like, hey, made you a bag for it, just so that's even easier to carry around, because I know I'm always terrified of scratching that fell over the other day, and thankfully not a scratch on it, no breaks or nothing. I was like, Well, the armor made it just right.
Din does fall over a lot, so that's very very
Oh my
true.
gosh.
So
I
on
mean,
brand.
the thing that happened so much in the last episode that I couldn't get over was how many times somebody grabbed him around the neck and yanked him back.
Getting knocked around by those
he had a
first
tough
few
season.
episodes.
Yeah.
He had a tough season.
Sorry, but I digress.
Right.
Well, we'll get to
and
that for sure.
Yeah.
To make a long story short, I remember getting a text like when I woke up, and I don't know, it was I think it was Insta or whatever, where Emily had reached out and was like, "Hey, I got this idea." Emily, I don't know if you want to take it from here.
So yeah, I would love to. So also over the course of my conventioning, I had done a convention in Sioux Falls, South Dakota that was completely for all the proceeds were going to an organization called Voices Against Cancer, which is an incredible initiative started primarily by families of children who are going through cancer treatment, families who have lost children to cancer, and it's focused on funding pediatric cancer research, but also really providing support to the families of those kids so that, obviously the kids need help. They need medical help. They need emotional support. They need, we want research to be cutting edge. We want all the latest advancements, but also it impacts the entire family. The siblings of those kids need help. There's financial support that's needed. And I felt like I was just so moved by the way this community that was largely also supported by the 501st and their local chapter, the way that they just circled up and they raised all this money and they were just so positive and proactive and generous and gracious. And so I started working with them, and I'm an ambassador for them. And so at almost every convention I do, I had been raffling off an autographed Funko Pop, and I would sell raffle tickets for $5. And all the proceeds, would go to Voices Against Cancer. And then at some point I was like, I want to up the ante here. Because everybody, like so many people came who already had Funko Pops or who didn't really want another Funko Pop. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool to have something much more unique to raffle off? And so I asked Jack how he would feel about making more hammers that I could take to conventions with me and that I could offer for the raffle. And he immediately said yes, and then began a rather painstaking process of building. How many hammers are you building right now?
I've got about 10 or so. There's a couple of rejects. I don't want to take any further. I'm like, no, you aren't worth trying to make work. So I got a couple I need to reprint, but we're looking at, I think 11 or so, and like we've raffled one off. But it was like when the armorer asks you for Beskar, you don't say no. So it's like, yeah, no, we can make this happen. And
I appreciate the outsourcing, because I've always wondered how on earth the armorer manages to make armor for everybody. Like, she needs an apprentice.
It takes a village.
The time is full.
That's right. That's right.
And I don't know if you want to share, like the first one we did, like, just gave me so much inspiration to get these going because it was so exciting.
So previously, the most we had raised in a weekend with the raffle was around $800 for a Funko Pop. And the first one that I have raffled off was at MegaCon in Orlando, and we raised, I think it was $2,600, which was just incredible. And everybody was so excited about it. And I had the volunteers get so excited about it, and they were like walking up and down the line, selling the tickets, and it's $5, and everybody, unfortunately, like everybody has been touched by cancer in some way. And so it's something that people feel really positive about donating money to. And it's also something that gets conversation going and I have formed relationships with people because we've gotten to share stories about how cancer has impacted our lives. And so it's yet another way that relationships have been formed at conventions, and it's been really, really cool.
It's so unique. Like I honestly have never really encountered like another celeb encounter experience like this at a convention where like they are raffling off a prop like that is so unique in the first place. And so I'm so excited that like you are like using this opportunity and like using Jack's expertise as well, because like I could speak for us as a trio and for everyone locally. We love Jack so much with his 3D printing skills, and the fact
What a
that like you guys
guy.
have this partnership, like
He made me that
it's
helmet.
fantastic. Yeah, like I'm just like so proud of all of this.
Thank you. And it, like when I heard the total, I was shocked, and it was like, all right, well, let's keep doing this. Let's keep doing this as long as we can, because this is exciting and it's so rewarding. Because you're absolutely right, Emily. I mean, my dad recently survived esophageal cancer, which is not an easy one to survive. But in any case, it was a horrifying year as we've tried to battle that. And so like nothing makes me happier than to try to fight cancer. So the other thing that I know is exciting for you, and that like people I think wonder a lot when it comes to the armor, like, oh, does Emily know how to do any of that kind of stuff? I wanted to give you a chance to plug what you got going on Saturday night.
Yes. So I have learned, well, first of all, I've learned that there's a big difference between space blacksmithing and real earthbound blacksmithing. But I have gotten to learn the foundations of earthbound blacksmithing with this incredible guy named Tony Swatton, who is sort of like this unsung secretive hero in Hollywood, because he's had to sign all these NDAs. So he's basically not ever allowed to say that he's worked on something. And I didn't even know that I broke his NDA when I posted about him. But nobody got mad, so I guess it was fine. The first season of Mando, there was a blacksmith that they brought in to work with me on set, like on the day. Excuse me, that's my dog barking. On the day that we were shooting those scenes, but it was sort of a mess because it's not, and I had tried to sort of like study up and learn what I could, but it's a hard thing to try to like learn as you're being shot, as you are wearing a helmet, as you are wearing giant gloves that John called my oven mitts, that were like really like, it was hard to pick things up. It was hard to tell if I was grabbing anything. I couldn't feel. And then they wanted things to look a certain way. And so we were sort of like changing from the foundation of the craft, like before I really understood the foundation. So when season 3 came around in the Book of Boba Fett, I wanted to get a head start on it. And so I got in touch with Josh, who does our props on the show, and asked him, if he had any suggestions. And he said, oh, well, you should just go to the guy who like built your hammers and built the armor that we use on the show. And I said, that would be fantastic. So he sent me to Tony, and Tony is just unbelievable. I don't think his hands are ever clean. His fingernails constantly have soot and, grease and dirt under them. And his shop is incredible. He's got like every machine imaginable, from, stuff that goes back to when you had to like hand crank something, and the very rudimentary things of, basic hammering. But then he's got power hammers, and he's got all this modern equipment, and it's just incredible. And so he taught me the foundations of it and the history of it, which was also really interesting to see the role that that blacksmiths have played in cultures. And it gave me so much of a deeper appreciation for where the armor sits within the Mandalorian culture, and why she would be so revered beyond the things that we already know about her, just having that position. And so, so I have worked with Tony a bit. And now this weekend, through another group called Momentous, we are doing a live stream meet and greet Zoom kind of thing, where Tony and I are going to make a Beskar spear. Don't tell. It was sort of the easiest thing to make in a short amount of time. It was easier to do than actual like pieces of armor. And then we're going to answer questions, and we'll have a little, meet and greet with people who have signed up for that. And I'm just excited because Tony is so charismatic and has so much passion for it. And I've definitely come to meet a lot of people, again, at the conventions who already have a love for metalwork and blacksmithing. And it's really cool to them to see this character who has become so prominent, who is a blacksmith. And, that's not terribly common. So that information, you can go to, on Instagram, you can go to bmoment.us, bmomentus, to find information about that. Or I don't know, is there some way that I can like put a link in a chat or something?
We can link it on our social or
but proceeds from that are also going to Voices Against Cancer. So
I'm pretty sure if you Google the Fandalorian, it pops up pretty quick.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's called the Mandalorian.
Mandalorian.
Yeah.
That's easy.
I'll grab it and drop it in the chat. And if you
awesome, thanks.
Yeah, I mean that's like so cool. And we'll definitely be tuning in for that. Like, I don't know, to be the armorer in Mando and actually have the first real world look into being an armorer in real life and doing blacksmithing like that is really cool. We do have a couple of questions that people sent in to us that I kind of chose two randomly. One of them had to do with that, but I guess I'll still play it. They sent a video in. This is our friend Nick who sent this in. So here we go.
Hello. My question is, did you receive any formal blacksmith training for your role as the armorer on The Mandalorian?
So
yes, I did.
Yeah. It was like the Jeopardy, answering it backwards, the question out there. But very nice Cobb Vanth armor in the background behind him there. That was nice. But yeah, that was a question from Nick, and we sort of talked about that. We have a question from our friend Dylan, and this is a really cool question. What do you think is the most important theme presented in Star Wars, and how does the armor connect to those themes?
Oh wow!
So
I don't know.
Deep one.
Anytime somebody asks me to choose like the most important or my most favorite, I'm like, oh, I can't.
I know.
And far be it from me to say what the most important theme is in Star Wars. One of the themes that's been so important to me with the armorer is this commitment to community and a selflessness and a sense of service that transcends everything else. And I think that also is something that is unfortunately rarer than we need to see, I think, in a lot of stories these days, that we have this character who is a mentor and sort of a leader of a group of people, but not a leader who, I had so many people who have asked me along the way, like, well, why doesn't the armor just take the Darksaber and rule Mandalore? And I've always felt like she has no desire to rule Mandalore. She is always in service of the greater good of her people. She's in service of, all along the way, I think she's been in service of Din Djarin and trying to make him the best that he can be. Even when she banished him, I feel like that was because she knew that this was something that he really needed to take stock of why he had removed his helmet and what that meant to him. And I think she knew that he would probably learn more from the challenge than from just like getting a pass. And I think that sense of community and that sense of service, and also really having faith. I mean, she's a character to me that represents a great deal of faith. And I think that that's something that we see all throughout Star Wars. We have these characters who have ideals that they really hold on to, and they really have faith when they're faced with all sorts of ridiculous odds against them, that good will win. And that if they hold to these ideals, that even if they have to go through a lot of turmoil on the way, that they're going to be better off in the end. Like, even if they lose technically, because they're staying true to this commitment that they have held to be so dear. And I think seeing people of that integrity and with that kind of hope is so resonant. And that's something that I've always attached to in the Star Wars movies and in the shows, and I think that too the armorer is somebody who has a lot of faith in the people around her and in the greater good. And it's been such a gift to get to embody somebody like that.
Yeah.
Jeez, you undersold yourself. You had that nailed down. That was great.
Yeah. I mean, like George always says, hope, right? Like that's exactly
faith and hope.
it.
You know, that's exactly it. Is right.
And it's funny after you say all those things. Like I feel so bad, and I'm not the only one. But coming into this season, and this was kind of an inside joke here, and not even an inside joke. But
AJ, what have you said the entire season about all of this?
Not the entire season. Halfway through, I changed, but I thought the Children of the Watch and the Armorer herself were kind of like not villains, but maybe like Bo-Katan calls them a cult, and I'm like, well, I don't know, but that's her point of view, and certainly she's changed her mind now, as have I. I've come around just like Bo-Katan. But I see people in the chat mentioning that a lot of people thought the Armorer was the spy even last week.
Oh my gosh!
And like,
yeah,
yes!
What a week for you.
What I'm trying to get to is like, what is your thought to these people that kind of thought you were a villain this whole time? I don't know if it's just the look with the horns and the mysteriousness.
The horns don't help.
And the whole, I mean, I don't think people love the whole you have to wear a helmet thing. It is what it is, but
I get it.
Yeah.
I think, well, first of all, I think that we don't like rules.
Yeah.
And it has, like, I feel like the thing of keeping on your helmet is this external display of an internal value. And I think over time, amongst the Mandalorian people, it got to be where there was too much focus on this external display. And I think that happens in religions. I think that happens with, anytime we might make a New Year's resolution that we want to stick to something because ultimately it's going to improve our well-being. It's going to make us feel better about ourselves. It's going to make us a better person in the world. And yet we can often lose track of like why it is we want to do that thing. And we keep looking at the external result. And, if it's something that we can check off and if it's something that we can show other people, and we lose sight of maybe like why we wanted to do that thing in the first place. And I think I understand why people have felt like Children of the Watch were a cult. And I think that it's easy to just make the helmet a target of that misunderstanding, or that frustration at what a lot of people have seen as rigidness. And look, I mean, the Armorer changed too, because she did go from telling Din that he wasn't a Mandalorian because he took off his helmet to recognizing that this thing of taking off your helmet had become a major obstacle to Mandalorians being able to communicate and to support each other. And at the end of the day, I think she realized too, especially seeing what Bo had displayed in terms of the internal show of what it means to be a Mandalorian, that it couldn't be as simple as have you kept on or removed your helmet. Maybe in the past that had been linked to something much deeper, but I think that it had become this surface thing. And it's still, I love that, like, now we're at this point where there's some Mandalorians that are going to keep on their helmets, and that makes them feel like they are truer, but they are accepting the people who don't, and they can agree to disagree. And that's, I think, the most important thing. I think it's not who's right and who's wrong about, like, should you keep your helmet on? Should you take it off? But can we respect the views of the other side and move forward together, because Mandalorians are stronger together. And I think that that's a message that, of course, applies to society. And I'm so glad that it wound up that way.
Yeah, no, that's great.
And
I think Din kind of helps the Armorer loosen up a lot over the course of the show. At the beginning of this season, she's like, "Oh no, Mandalore's dead," And then he shows up and he's like, look at this green rock. It's not dead. She's like, you might be right. And then again, at the end of the season, you can't take this little freaky green dude as your son. And he's like, but what if I can? And she's like, all right. So it's like he helps her loosen up with the rules. And I think that, it's
I
kind
think
of
she
meeting
helps
everybody
him
in the
take
middle.
responsibility.
Goes both ways.
He's like, hey, make Grogu a Mandalorian apprentice. And she's like, well, sorry, he doesn't have parents. And like, he hasn't been willing up until that point to say, like, I will claim him as my son. And so I feel like they're sort of pushing each other. She wants him to say the thing. And then he finally does.
That's a really good point. I never thought of that. Sends him to Mandalore so that he can see for himself that it might not be desolate,
So
it's the same thing. That's a good point.
After a Book of Boba Fett, the way the armor spoke about Bo, it seemed like there was going to be some kind of standoff between the two if they ever got on the same plane. And so, like, I remember the moment that like they landed, and I was like, "Oh, here it comes!" And then like there wasn't really much at all. Were you surprised that was the direction like that the armor took with Bo, or did that seem right to you? Like that she would?
No, that seemed totally in character. Because I don't think that she, when she said Bo-Katan is a cautionary tale, I think she was just talking about the way Bo acted at that time in that situation. And
that's true.
I think that Bo, when she presented herself, was a different person. And it's so interesting to me how easy it is for people to hear. I don't even want to use the word negative, but I guess like,
it was honest criticism.
Yeah, it was honest criticism about Bo. But and people immediately say like, oh, well, that means they're going to fight. That means she doesn't like her. That means but she was just saying like, look, girlfriend did not act as well as she could have in this situation. And things didn't go well. But people change.
Yeah, and like when Bo labels it a cult, like that was a damning moment for the Covert, and it made it really hard to see them as anything else when he suddenly was ostracized for it. But this season was just so cool to see Mandalorians of all different cultures, the way they like grapple with things like, hey, how do we all eat together? Like, what an amazing moment.
Still got to figure that one out.
Yeah. I was wearing a jetpack in that final episode. Like, did you get to do those stunts?
Oh yeah.
I didn't get to do all the fun like wire stuff with the flying. I so wish.
They still don't want you to do the cool stuff.
Oh, you didn't get rigged up? You didn't get wired up?
No. They wouldn't let me.
I loved her jetpack. It was like so fitting. It was like
Isn't
a
it
fashion
fashionable?
Yeah,
the armor is so fashionable.
Yeah, I mean the fur definitely does it. It's cool.
It does. It adds a lot to it. I admire her tenacity to keep the hammer, even when she's flying with the jetpack in the middle of a battle filled with blasters, and she's just bopping people on the head with a hammer.
That was awesome.
That's just great.
That was
that one awesome. Shot where she just like came through
right through the camera. Yeah.
It's very satisfying. Well, and that was something that we did discuss because we did shoot some stuff with, and I think there was even a shot of the concept art where she had a big blaster. Yeah. And we talked about that. And I'm so glad that it wound up that way, that they did only use the stuff with the hammer and tongs, because that feels so right to her. Yeah. And that was something that I know Lateef really fought for, because he, in addition to being, amazing capoeira extraordinaire, fighting Din Djarin, he also consults on a lot of the fights, and he's sort of been the through line with the combat since season 1, because he's been here the whole time, and we've had a couple of different stunt coordinators who are amazing, but we just haven't had the same person all the way through. And I think that he really has such a good sense for what is right for these characters. And so I know that he was a big advocate for that. And I was really hopeful that they would keep to just the hammer and tongs. And I mean, it's so satisfying. And I had so much fun. Somebody sent me a link to this YouTube video of reactions to that scene where they're ambushing the pirates. and the armor goes in there with
Yes.
her top.
Yeah.
It was the most satisfying thing to watch.
That entire sequence, I remember when we were chatting about it afterwards, because we just do like the one day later talking about it. My immediate reaction was, how did the armor get to the planet? Because you didn't have your jetpack yet, so you were immediately just like there, just like whoop, she just like appeared, and like it was just a little
Good question.
magical.
He's
So
crafty that way.
Who carried you? Who carried
I mean, I will tell you, we did shoot a scene of me walking off a ship, but that wasn't in there. So
Yeah.
okay,
I like
okay.
that she just appears.
It is cooler because it's like, where is she? And then all of a sudden she appears with the in that office, in
Yeah.
Grief's office, I think it was. And then I love the tong move of grabbing the guy by the
Oh
collar.
my gosh,
That was
yes.
amazing.
It's just so visceral.
Yeah,
Yeah.
seriously.
That crunch down there. Oh man. Yeah, like I didn't think you could top the fight in the end of season 1 until
Yeah.
we just got to see the armor in action this season. It's been
Yeah.
very fun.
I see someone mention Paz's son, Ragnar. So what was it like having Ragnar? That was Jimmy Kimmel's son, I believe.
His nephew, Wesley.
Nephew.
Kimball.
Okay. Jimmy
Yeah.
Kimmel's nephew. Like that's how the season started, and that's kind of how the season ended
Yeah.
with Ragnar's little ceremony. And I thought that was kind of a cool little bookend to the
Yeah,
season.
because he never really got the full ceremony at the beginning. It
Yeah, the
got
alligator.
interrupted by a very rude, uninvited guest.
Yeah. And
good
it
thing
could have happened
the,
again at the end.
Yeah, I was
but
gonna say the mythosaur decided to
I know,
go
right?
back to sleep.
these are
Yeah, I
good
feel like
ones.
that last shot of the mythosaur was him like, you guys, keep it down up there.
Yeah,
Exactly.
right.
Yeah.
There's-
When
there's
you're in
some-
bed, you're in your like cozy little nook. You're like, I'm not getting up. I'm not
Yeah.
for nothing.
Ragnar has such bad luck with animals too, so it's good that
That's
the
what I
mythosaur didn't-
said. I was like, dude, I mean,
don't-
we
don't
need to
go
have a
inside.
talk about this kid and the fact that like every time he's around, we get sea creatures, we get creatures from the air.
Is it
Something's
like
up.
is it the soap he's using? What is
I
it?
bet. I bet.
Something like that. Yeah. But yeah, to have Ragnar in there now, and I think we said a couple of weeks ago, we should have known maybe Paz's fate was coming to, a bad end there, unfortunately, last week. Like that was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And
It was so beautiful though. It was just so
was.
right.
the Praetorian guards looked really cool, and it was
Yeah.
a tough death, but it was a nice sacrifice for him,
Stood his
for everyone
ground.
to get away. Yeah.
He could have used a hammer. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. I honestly thought he
Well,
was going to get out of it.
Yeah.
Well, and I love that it sort of came, it was such a beautiful arc for his character too. And Tate Fletcher, who does he's in the suit for Paz. He's such an extraordinary human being. And knowing him has really influenced how I think about the armor and Paz. And one of the things that we both said was that it's not that Paz really, he didn't change his views because he's always had a great sense of loyalty to fellow Mandalorians. It's just that at the beginning, he didn't really accept Din as a Mandalorian. And to see, in that very first season, I think in the 3rd episode, where he's the one that steps up and he's like, how can we accept this guy? And then to have this come full circle and he is willing to sacrifice his life, partly because of Din, it's just so beautiful. And he's as Tate uses the phrase, hold the line a lot. And that's exactly what he's doing. And it's just so beautiful to see because, we sympathize with Din at the beginning and we don't know who Paz is. And we think he's this big bully. But it's because we're on the hero side. And then to finally have this understanding, I think, of how deep his loyalty runs and how much he is willing to sacrifice. It was just such a beautiful ending for that character.
Yeah. He almost
And
got
I
the
think-
Darksaber too.
Yeah.
Almost.
Oh,
I think I saw you post on social media last week that you shared the credits with him. Was that like a only one-time thing, or had that happened before? Or
I don't think it's happened before.
okay, that's really cool.
Yeah, I don't think it's been really cool this season because they have included more people. It's such a weird. I don't know all of the legal background of it, but it's a weird thing the way like credits are done on a show. And sometimes it has to do with like what you've negotiated in your contract. And sometimes it has to do with like all these nitpicky things that have nothing to do with what we're seeing as the audience and like who we think is important in the story. And so for a while, like Brendan and Lateef were not listed in that main list of credits at the end. I think this is the first season that has happened, where they haven't been listed like as stunt performers or, you know, doubles or something like that. They're just straight up in the credits. And I know that Tate and I have never shared like the same title card. And so for that to happen in that episode was really special, because I think it's with the actors who do body work, but for whom there's another person doing the voice work, like sometimes they don't get listed in the credits. It's all very weird. And so that I think was done very intentionally to honor the incredible work that Tate has done, even though like we're not hearing his voice. He has brought so much to that character.
Right. So that's really cool that in his final, I don't want to say his final episode, because who knows, like maybe who knows what'll happen. It's Star Wars, you never know. Especially just like a flashback or something. But anyways,
as Vizsla clones.
No.
To go, oh, clones.
I don't know.
I know. Do we really think that those Moff Gideon clones are all gone?
I don't.
This stash kit thing.
Well,
I don't know.
I don't
That
know.
was really easy.
I slept on it a bit, and I was like, you know what? Why would they introduce clones not to have like one slip away somewhere? Like,
it's Chekhov's clones. You can't introduce the clones and not have them, you know,
they're hanging over the fireplace.
Exactly.
That's good.
Yeah, I mean the data has to get to Hux, so you know, like at some point that has to happen.
And to be clear, I'm not saying this because I know anything.
Of course
This is
not.
pure speculation.
I don't think. I hope. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about all that. That was. I was cool to see the Dark Trooper suit again, because like that was in the final level of Dark Forces, like the Imperial Moffat, like the bad guy of that game, literally has a Dark Trooper suit. It's like the final build of the thing, and like that was kind of lacking at the end of season 2. It was cool to see Giancarlo again with that. Like he's such a great villain. Oh, he does such great work.
Jack, did you say Dark Forces?
I was gonna say I thought we were gonna make it a whole episode with our.
I think I wasn't gonna make a Dark Forces reference if I could.
There it is. And this was served to you on a silver platter. I mean, you had to talk about that.
So to circle back to, because I think one of the most interesting things this season was definitely the rise of Bo-Katan, and you know, even the armor kind of rising with her to unite Mandalore and Din. But like we get this shot here of you passing the torch to Bo-Katan.
Yeah.
And like that's such a great image with everyone watching, both unhelmeted and helmeted. Like, I don't know. But when the armor was in the old forge on Navarro in the little basement there, whatever you want to call it, and she calls Bo down to meet with her, and it's like, hey, we need you to lead us. Like, how did the armor see the rise of Bo-Katan? And even like another question morphed into that was when Bo tells the armorer that she saw the mythosaur. What is like, we can't see the armorer's reaction under her helmet, and she's super chill. Like, or you're super chill about it under there. Just like, yeah, this is the way. Like, what do you think her reaction is to that? Because that's a pretty groundbreaking thing to hear.
Yeah. Well, we talked about that.
Right.
And the mythosaur is something, you know, back in the book of Boba Fett, the armor says that the songs of Eon Past spoke of the mythosaur, but it exists only in myths. And I don't think it's really, I mean, what we decided was, you know what, it's not important whether or not the armorer thinks that Bo actually saw a mythosaur, because even if she thinks she did, and she has now been willing to come present herself to this covert helmeted, to humble herself that way, and to make herself vulnerable, really, to say, like, I think I saw a mythosaur. And she's already saved Din. Like, she's presented all of these qualities that are the makings of somebody who could lead. And she showed that, like, she doesn't want to wear a helmet all the time, but she's willing to do it when she's come. I think that it's just sort of like, okay, there's the practical aspect of this person clearly has the makings to be a good leader. And there's a little bit of the, I don't know, it's like a prophecy almost. The armorer, I think, is somebody who looks for clues all the time and looks for signs. And so to have, it's not accidental that Bo is the person to bring up the mythosaur in this moment. And just that she has the potential to believe, I think, is very telling in that moment. And so I think that is another piece of the puzzle of who could be somebody who could bring us together. And that's, one of the ways that she starts to present herself that way. And yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't know if the armorer like really believes her, like that she truly saw it, because,
right.
Maybe she thinks Bo was hallucinating, maybe, but she had a vision of some sort, even if she didn't see it.
Yeah.
And she doesn't say it in a way that feels like, and this is a tribute to Katie's incredible acting. She says it in a way that is so sort of vulnerable. And it's not like she's trying to get something out of it. It's not like, hey, I saw the mythosaur, so, you better do something special for me.
Yeah.
She doesn't really know what it means. She's sort of unsettled by it.
Yeah, that whole 2-episode arc there when she goes to meet with the Children of the Watch and everyone, she's very unsettled. You can kind of tell she doesn't have the same swagger she did, and then she gets that back, by the end. And I think that's a good point you make about the mythosaur, that it doesn't really matter. It kind of goes with the Darksaber in this episode gets crushed, which was very surprising. But once again, like, you don't need that to be the leader.
Not at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, and that sort of goes back to what we were talking about, like with the helmets and with the armorer really sticking to that rule at the beginning and then sort of shifting away from that. This external thing has come to get in the way of what it is supposed to symbolize internally. And so it's best to kind of just do away with it, I think.
Yeah.
You don't need the Darksaber, but you do need the talking stick.
Yes.
I love that they use that the hammer
is
as
my favorite.
the talking stick.
I know.
Do you think that's going to be adopted by the broader Mandalorian culture? Like, we're going to see Mandalore in 100 years and everybody's going to have like the hammer to speak in front of people and stuff like that? I'd love that.
Well, and then like which hammer is allowed to be used? Like, can it just be any hammer? Because then everyone's going to be walking around with a hammer.
I don't see a problem with that.
Well, hey, Jack has plenty to give out, so.
Hey, you watch it. These are ours. These are for the foundlings.
So to go back to the whole Spies thing, because I think that's very interesting, and people are very confused by that. But I know a lot of people on the internet, and Matt pointed me in this direction. Matt, if you kind of want to take the talking hammer here with this.
Oh, thank
with the
you.
whole Spies thing.
Grab that.
I'll just pass it to you here.
He gets the wrong
I
side.
can't. It never gets the right side. No, so the spies. A lot of people thought that meant literal spies, but it's actually in reference to the biblical story of the 12 spies who go to the land of Canaan from the Israelites to scout out the land and see if they it's worthy of returning to, and that's a pretty deep cut for Jon Favreau to make. Like that's relying a lot on the people to kind of figure that out and put the pieces together. I personally think that is insanely, obviously very clever. But yeah, so that kind of storytelling where it's like a mix of both cultures and they show up to Mandalore and they're checking it out, seeing if it's, on the up and up, I think that's just way cooler than, somebody's a spy and they're gonna tattle on you. Like, well,
that's why I was so shocked, because I had no idea that it would be interpreted that way. Because and I think before I even knew what the episode was called, when I got that script, I made that connection, just because of my faith background and reading the Bible. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. Because this is kind of like, it could be pulling from that, where the Israelites, like you said, like go and they're checking out Canaan before they can decide if the whole people can be moved there? You know, is it a safe place? Can we trust this? And they are called spies. And John, you know, I think that he does. I mean, he loves cultural myths and cultural stories, and I know that he has pulled from Jewish stories, and there is, you know, a feeling of universality to that. But I had no idea that people would interpret it as, oh, well, we know that there's this one spy, and now this episode is titled Spies, so there must be another spy. And I didn't even realize that it could be put together that it would look like the armorer was a spy. And so I was so shocked when that sort of exploded after that episode, to the point that I had to like go back, because, you know, we shot this a year ago, and I had to go back and look at my script and look at my scenes for the last episode. And I was like, is there any way that they could be setting me up and I don't even know? You know, they were pulling like a Luke Skywalker thing or something.
Oh, there you go.
And I was like, no, they're not. And I also just felt like it would be such a deep, deep blow to undermine a character who does have so much integrity and who has been such a moral center. That would just hurt. Like, I don't think it would be worth the shock value. So, but it was pretty fun, because I was at a convention this last weekend after that episode aired, and like half the people that came up to my table, they were like, okay, so tell me. Or they were like looking at me kind of shifty, or they were like, Team Armorer, you're not a spy.
I'm telling you, it's the horns.
What does that mean?
People took so much stock in the horns and the design.
It's the horns, man. Like,
well, and people are so quick to be cynical, right? Like that they would so quickly go like, oh, well, yeah, she must.
To be fair, I never thought you were the spy, even though coming into the season, I wasn't.
Even though you didn't really like me that much, you didn't think I was clever enough to be a spy.
No. I thought it was X. I thought it was X Woes, for the record.
I love this redemption arc for AJ over the course of the season.
It's so perfect, because all season this was a thing, and it seems like each week I would ask someone, "Hey, what do you think of the Armorer? Like, what do you think of the Children of the Watch?" I used to say, "What do you think of the cults?" But then I changed it, and now, like, who better to ask about that than you? So, like, it's been a redemption arc, I guess.
Beautiful.
No, Chad is lying in the chat. I did not think the armor was the spy. I thought Axe was. Apologies to Axe as well. He was.
Yeah. I also thought Axe was the spy. I was like, no, there's no way the armor did, because, like you said, like, you've been holding down Mando culture for like 30 plus years. Like, you don't, and you bash stormtroopers. Like, there's no way you're gonna then work with them. No, that just doesn't make any sense for you. I'm curious, because you had a pretty extended scene with Grogu. Two things. I wanted to know, what was it like working with the Grogu animatronic? Because, like, God, that thing is so cute. And B, do you think the armorer goes through flashbacks every time she forges something? Because it seems, I don't know, is that like an area of effect thing, do you think? Like, what's your theory?
Working with Grogu is always a trip, because, I mean, he's a stinking puppet. And you forget that, because he's so adorable, and because the people who are controlling him are so masterful at making him react just the right way. But it's also comical, because, you know, he's this little guy, and the team that is operating the puppet are these like large men who wear, I mean, especially when he was inside IG-12, we had Mike, we had one of the puppeteers who had to wear the IG-12 rig in front of him. He had this thing over his shoulders, and he had weights on his back to counterbalance it. Yeah. And he had to walk everywhere that IG-12 was walking. And I was like, you need to market this as a workout method, because you would get a lot of fans who would subscribe. You just send them their own IG-12 suit that they have to wear, and, you know, you're carrying like 50 pounds of weight with you, doing all these movements, all for the sake of this little green guy. But like in that, you know, in the episode when the armorer takes Din Grogu into for that forging sequence where he has the flashbacks, and he's like walking behind her into the cave. I'm glad that we cut because I was like, I wonder how long it takes them to walk down to the forge.
God. Oh my goodness.
But you had little bitty Grogu, and then you had these two like 6 foot tall men on either side of him who were having to like do the puppet and walk alongside and shuffle very quickly. And then, they get CGI'd out, or I always say that Mike is like the drunk guy at the party because he's always having to like lie underneath a table so that he can do the puppeteering, or lie under a bench, or like crouch in a corner somewhere. And then you have people on remotes there's one person doing his ears, there's one person doing his eyes, there's one person doing, I guess, his head. And it's just, and it takes so long to do his scenes because you have to do it with the puppet. Then you have to do like a clean plate so they can do CGI stuff afterwards. And then sometimes you do it like, we never know when we're going to have access to, because we were always shooting like 2 units at the same time, 2 different episodes. And so we had to have the right Grogu, because there's a Grogu that just sits there. There's a Grogu that moves. And he's, for not being a living, breathing human being, he's the biggest diva on set.
Oh.
He takes the most time for everything.
So disappointed to hear that.
I'm not surprised at all.
It's just ridiculous. But then there's so many fun moments with him. I mean, in the last episode where he's getting his title Din Grogu, and we were doing that sequence where he gazes at himself in the water and the camera was just on him. But Brendan and I were in there as Din Djarin and the armorer. And it didn't matter that we were off camera. Like, I don't know why most of the time we only goof off when we're not on camera, even though, like, why does it matter? Because you can't see our mouths move. They are recording our dialogue. But I had like Grogu singing to himself in the water. Like he was singing, "I feel pretty." And we just have so much fun making fun of him.
Should have kept that in.
Season 4, a musical.
Oh yeah, there you go.
No.
Grogu on ice.
There we go. There we go. Oh, I like that.
First he learns how to speak, then he gets his chops.
Yeah. Yeah. What if he's gone from just like cooing to just like full out musical numbers?
Hey, Dad.
Does he sing like Yoda? Does he have to sing backwards?
Oh, maybe.
He did not when I was providing the inspiration.
Okay.
That's canon. That's
I think
canon.
you're the biggest authority on that right now.
Yeah.
So we'll go.
Yeah,
with
I think so.
Yeah, it really broke the mold.
It's cool to hear about how all that works with the puppeteering for Grogu, because I mean, to have him be pretty much practical, it looks great.
Yeah.
On this show, we're kind of a big fan of Puppet Yoda.
Yes.
Yoda, baby.
Because the prequels, and they went back and kind of changed episode 1 around, but the prequels had CG Yoda, and that was one thing. But we always loved the practicality of it, having Puppet Yoda. So Puppet Grogu looks great.
Yep, I'll always take Puppet Grogu, even if it takes him 20 minutes to walk into the room. I love that you brought that up, because that was one of my biggest questions this season. The armorer strolls into the forge, and then you just see Grogu just hop, like very slowly, and it's like, is she just waiting for him, or like what's going on?
She's probably built an entire set of armor while she's waiting.
Honestly,
It's like, I'm just gonna get some of my back work done. And I'll wait for this guy. But yeah, it was funny when we were shooting that, because they were talking about like, okay, what shots do we need to get for this scene and what coverage? And at some point somebody's like, well, we need to get Grogu like walking into the room. And somebody was like, no, we don't. That's going to take forever. Just make him appear.
Yeah, because it brings up too many questions.
Yeah. Jamie, I know. Oh, sorry,
ahead.
Jack, you go ahead.
Go ahead, Jay. I was just going to point out, like at the end, it was like the way he waddled into the.
I love that.
It cracks me up.
His legs were flying. Jamie, I know you had. It's not really an armor thing, but with this episode, you had a really good take about Grogu when he's with the Praetorian guards. With that whole thing.
So like one thing I've absolutely loved this season with Grogu is how he's developed using the Force, because he's always either been very aggressive with it to the point where he passes out, or he's still like learning about it. And so I love how, especially in these like past 2 episodes, he's using it for defense, and pretty much defense only. Like he's shoving weapons out of the way, he's protecting Din, and he's protecting Bo-Katan. And I love every single time that he like showcases that, and it just goes to reflect like how much like he cares about everyone else that is raising him, so the armorer included, and everyone in the Children of the Watch as well. And like I love seeing how he's developed as a little Mandalorian Jedi somehow.
Yeah, since his
It's
time
so
with
true
Luke.
because he, when he first found that he had this power, he didn't know how to use it, and he's been willing to. I love that he's been able to. I guess he's another one who walks both worlds, the Jedi world and the Mandalorian world, and he could use it to show off a whole lot more, and we didn't see him doing that this season, and that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Just a couple times, like doing flips like around like Ragnar with like the paintballs, like that was
unnecessary.
That was
I mean,
amazing.
Ragnar sort of had it coming.
Yeah,
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
I think you could do all three in one round. I think the rules should have been explained before we started this duel.
There
there
are
are no rules.
except you have to wear a helmet.
I've been curious because I love accents, and like the one that you've chosen for the armor is just so enigmatic. Is there like a particular dialect that you chose to model it after, or is it just like what comes to mind? Or
Well, it's British-ish because when I auditioned, they were mostly seeing British actors, and so they asked me, they being to be clear, like the one person I went in for one audition with the casting associate. They put me on tape, and that was it. So I never like met with anybody else until like a few days before we were shooting. And they asked me to do a British dialect because they were seeing British women in their 50s and 60s for the role. And so he said, you know what, you should probably do a take with the dialect just because that's what they have been seeing, just to see which one they like better. And then John wanted to keep it or some semblance of it. So it's, I think about it being British, but I'm not thinking about any specific place or region or whatever. I do want it to be sort of vague because it just gives her, like you said, it makes her a little more mysterious. It makes her, it sets her apart from everybody, and that just feels right.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, Concordian accent, we'll say.
Yeah.
I love the way she says Grogu. It's like the best pronunciation. It's weird to say I love the way she says it, but you're the one that says it. So
yeah,
kind of weird. But
I do that too. I mean, I talk about her in the third person all the time.
Right. I guess that makes sense. But like we've talked about the armor here, obviously because we have you here. But what was like your thoughts as a viewer, watching this season and even this episode, this finale?
I was so excited this season to see a lot of those questions about whether or not there could be reconciliation amongst the Mandalorians, to see that played out in real time. And I loved seeing the redemption of Bo's character. I love seeing that there could be somebody who had, risen to great heights and made some mistakes and who'd sort of given up. And then ultimately, because she can't help but help somebody else when she goes to rescue Din, she's set off on this other course, which is sort of mirroring, I think, what Din went through in season 1, because when we first met him, he's determined to be this Lone Ranger. He doesn't want to depend on anyone. He doesn't want anyone depending on him. And then in spite of himself, he cares about this weird little green guy. And, he's feeling the pangs of obligation and wanting to be selfless and to help him. And through that finds all these other incredible connections. I mean, like seeing the arc that Grief Karga has gone through since season 1 is hilarious to me, because partly just because like Carl is, I love Carl so much. And so, seeing him go from being so tough and bad to now being this guy who's like, he's almost like Moses in one of the episodes where he's like leading his very small community out.
Surprisingly small.
I kept saying like, there's not that many people who live in Navarro.
Maybe the
rest just bunkered in.
They got lost.
Did.
Yeah,
I felt the same way. I really needed more people in that shot.
But it is thriving. It's thriving.
It's totally thriving.
It's clear. It's thriving.
You have to believe it.
So thriving.
Droid's carrying his cape. You got to believe him.
Oh yeah.
Just like total side note, I love how you keep referring to Grogu as Green Guy because before like we knew what his name was, I always have just called him Green Guy. Like I like outright refuse to call him Baby Yoda, and so like just like hearing like this like validation that you also just refer to him as Green Guy, I'm just like, please, thank you. Like it's Green Guy and Green Guy only. Like I only own like 2 Green Guys, the big one and then this like little one, and like he's Green Guy. That's who he is.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Yeah. But the finale here, you know, Mandalorians are united. You pass the torch to Bo-Katan. X-Wolves yells for Mandalore. Everyone seemed to love that line. It was cool. And then lighting that big forge, which maybe we can assume that, you know, we'll be seeing you using that. I don't know. Who knows? I can only assume, but
I sure don't know.
yeah. It would make sense. I mean, it's the forge, and that's your thing. So
yeah,
but it was so cool to see all that.
Yeah, definitely.
It wrapped up with such a bow, so it's like the it really could go anywhere from here, because like that just ending in that like the little Looney Tunes like spotlight on Grogu.
That was something.
Yeah, I mean, this definitely felt like it wrapped up an arc, like for everybody. Like everybody who's involved kind of gets like their kind of happy ending. I mean, really, other than Paz, but everybody else,
it's an ending.
It's an ending. Yeah, you know, it's an ending. It's neat. It doesn't have to be happy, I guess. But you know, it's just funny that I was not expecting the Armorer to have an arc this season, especially the one she got. So, and that's, you know, that's on you. You did that. So good job. Thank you.
Oh, thanks.
Did you guys have any other questions for Emily for, you know, the Mandalorian? Because I had a couple other that don't have to do with the Mandalorian.
I guess one other question I had. Sorry, I'll be quick. One other question I had was just like, what is, out of all the scenes you've done, what's your favorite scene? Because this character has to be fun to play.
Now you're gonna ask me favorites again.
I have to ask favorites, but you did so well with the other favorites question, so you're gonna nail this one too.
Yeah.
Oh golly, I mean, well, it depends on whether I'm looking at, you know, there's a difference between, especially with this character, there's a difference between how it feels shooting it versus how satisfying it is in the end. Because it can often be really awkward to shoot because of my limited vision and limited range of motion. And because it's such a technical show, there's a lot of stopping and starting. Oh man. I mean, there were so many that I really enjoyed this season. I loved that scene in Peter Ramsey's episode where I did ask Bo to remove her helmet, and it did. I mean, it partly because it felt so. I felt like even in the playing of it, the two of us were sort of like, I wonder what's going to happen here, because she's sort of feeling out Bo still. You know, she doesn't know how she's going to respond to that.
Yeah.
And it was just really cool to have this scene between these two incredible women who are both strong leaders and who apparently a lot of people expected to fight, who we get to see like hunker down. And when they're in this little room together, they come to this understanding of, all right, we can work together. I mean, they don't even know exactly what that means. They're just going to try it, because the Armorer doesn't know if Bo's going to be successful at walking both worlds. Like there could be, as Bo herself says, when she goes back to these other Mandalorians that she's been associated with before, she doesn't know if they're going to accept her. So it's a gamble. And also the Armorer doesn't know if her own people are going to get really ticked off that she's let her remove her helmet. So I loved that as sort of a fulcrum for that. I mean, for a lot of the like sort of, that was a big turning point, I think, in the season. But then like just it was so much fun to shoot and so satisfying to shoot that scene in the living waters at the end, because the set was like this huge, beautiful, like cave-like room. And we were in this pool of water, and we actually, oh my gosh, we went through that, the helmet ceremony that you and like the, you know, almost like a baptism, I guess, that you see me do with Ragnar. I actually went through that for about 6 different characters.
wow.
Oh, really?
And with reciting that creed and having them repeat it back to me. And it took a real long time.
Mm.
And each of those actors who were playing those characters, like some of the Mandalorian survivors, Bo-Katan, and so it really felt like when we were shooting those days, like we were all sort of in this sacred place. And then, but the whole time we were also kind of like, are they really going to use all this? And Rick, who was directing, was equally going, I don't think we're going to be able to use all this, but we're going to shoot it. And it was one of those things where even though you don't see it as the audience, I'm actually really glad that we went through it, because it was cool to have that feeling of ceremony and for all of us to experience that and to really think about, okay, well, who would have been a part of this larger ceremony? And then at the end of it, like, I think it was perfect that we got to see Ragnar, because we got to see him finally have the end of his little ceremony, and then have that moment with Grogu and with Din. It was just such a special experience.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And then the Grogu musical number.
Yeah, that's the credit scene. Yeah.
I have to ask, even though I understand if you can't answer a question like this, because it might be a little bit too much of a question. But regarding like the whole living waters scene with the baptism, I thought it was a little interesting that there wasn't any mention of Paz, of like honoring him at the end. Was there anything that you guys possibly filmed, or even like it was just like in like remembrance, like honored him in any sort of way during that sequence?
Maybe.
Okay, that's fair.
Okay, that's fair.
I understand. But yes, I think that the whole like
Dan.
Ragnar baptism was like, I think, honoring him enough, because it also was like fully having him involved. But that's something I wish that they like added a little bit more into. So
yeah,
I miss him.
Something I just remembered that I wanted to kind of bring up was the other group of Mandalorians we meet that are on Mandalore. I call them like the pirate Mandalorians, because they had a little pirate ship, I guess.
Yeah, the survivors.
Yeah. And I forget their character's name. I was calling, there's the one Skinny Pete from Breaking Bad. We just kept calling him that.
Yes.
But he had like a battle droid, a B2 battle droid. I'm getting over nerdy here, but as a pauldron on his shoulder. And I thought that was just a really cool touch. I wonder what the armorer would think of that, but it was cool. It was cool to see those Mandos.
That's something that him and Din have in common, because that thigh plate, I spent like hours trying to figure out where that came from when season 2 was happening. That's from Q90. Like he had that hanging up in the back of the Razor Crest, and he just ripped that thigh plate off and just stuck it on him. Yeah.
Well,
wow.
I did not know that. That's really cool.
So I think like and like he had a shore trooper pauldron before, so it's like like I think for Mando's, like scavenging what you can if you can't get Beskar is good enough at times.
It's a Mando skill.
Yeah.
Somebody had a good question for you. Our friend Angel asks, like, is there any challenge of acting through a helmet? Because is this really the only role you've had to do that for? Like, and is not be able to show your facial expressions. And Matt, I think you even had a question on our list about acting that way, because you kind of have to act a different way, I imagine.
Yeah, you're the only one
to show your face,
except for Katie, I guess.
Yeah,
is that kind of like that challenge?
It used to be much more of a challenge, but it's just part of the character now, so I don't think about it that way. And it's really, to me, it doesn't feel like I'm, like, my approach to the character is still the same. It's just putting more thought into what will communicate best and what will be most truthful for her. Because you have someone whose face is obscured, and it could go a number of ways. It could be that person, because they know you can't see their face, they might be even more expressive with their hands. They might move around a lot more. They might like try to show you more. And that definitely didn't feel right for her. And it was such a pleasure at the beginning of shooting the series to we had a little bit of a sandbox where we were all trying to figure that out, all of us who were in armor. Because it's also, I have done mask work before for theater, but I've never done it on camera. And I feel like that is a different thing, because when you're on stage, the audience can see your entire body all the time. And so you get to control whether you're going to pull focus if there's something that you need them to know. But when you're on camera, you don't know when they're going to cut to you. You don't know if they're going to use like a tight close up or if they're going to use a wider shot. And I think when you can't see someone's face, you're that much more focused on their movements. And so the physical movements become very important and can become very distracting. And that was something that became apparent early on too. If I shifted too much, if I fidgeted, or like if I, you can't like look down to check where you're going because it just looks distracting. And she is somebody who I think trusts the stillness and trusts space in conversations and, space. It's okay to her if people don't know exactly where she's coming from all the time. And so that was an interesting thing to sit with, and felt uncomfortable at first, just because like I'm not like that in real life at all. I am somebody who's like constantly moving around, and I use my face a lot. And so I had to really be patient and really trust that what I was thinking and what I was feeling would come across without me needing to like show it. And I found that to be true. And then I found if it was a little more, and not ambivalent, that's not the word I'm looking for. It was a little more obscured and it wasn't entirely clear. Maybe that was okay, because I think it's great that we don't always know exactly what the armorer is thinking. I think that works for that character. So,
yeah.
So yeah, it was it was a really, really cool challenge to take on. I loved that, having that obstacle of not being able to communicate that way. But I don't really think about it as like, okay, I can't use my face now, especially because I've lived with her for so long. When I put on that suit and when I step into those scenes, I just feel what her physical presence is and the kind of space that she takes up and what her pace is. And it feels a lot more second nature.
Cool. Very cool.
Something I just thought of as you were saying all that, and someone kind of mentioned it, that I think you showed off a video today of you at Fan Expo or some convention where you walked around in a costume as the armorer. How it's like, as a cosplayer, and Jack knows all about this, walking around with the helmet, I do have to look at my feet and I can't walk around. But did any of that acting like help you walk around the whole convention floor like that? And how was that experience?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, because I was used to it, but it was also a new environment, and not as controlled an environment as the set. And so I was much more cautious because I didn't want to like run over some kid or step on somebody.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a little different that way. And I also wasn't as careful. Like I didn't worry as much about like staying in character and not looking down. And if I needed to check where I was going, I did.
Yeah. That was such a great video.
Really
funny,
so much fun.
Yeah.
Such a cool thing.
Yeah. That's a blast.
I'm glad to hear you.
Oh, sorry, Jack.
I was just going to add, I'm glad to hear that you don't take it so serious. I've learned to start to relax a little bit more with the helmet and stuff as a cosplayer, because it's like, you got to take care of yourself first in all seriousness.
Let me repeat that, Jack. You need to take care of yourself when you're in full costume. Like we've had many an experience.
Yeah. Heat strokes are not the way.
No. My non-Star Wars question, unless these guys have any other things.
No.
Well, it's a non-Mandalorian question. It is a Star Wars question. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I was lost in my mind.
You know
there
what
for a
podcast is this?
I forgot. So it's another favorites thing, but I'm gonna rephrase it. Other than the Mandalorian, do you have a couple of other favorite Star Wars stories, whether it's films or some of the other shows or whatever?
Well, the first one that I feel like I latched onto when I was a kid was I saw Return of the Jedi and just fell in love with Ewoks. And Ewoks were totally my jam. Like I played Ewok adventures in my backyard, and I had little Ewok dolls. And so they've always they've always been near and dear to me. And actually at the convention where I first met Jack, that was the first time that I'd gotten to meet an Ewok cosplayer.
Oh, I remember that with Colleen. They were so excited.
Oh, it was incredible because I'd never met a real Ewok before. And it just totally took me back to being like 6 years old, and it was magical. And then at this last celebration, I got to meet Warwick Davis, who was 11 years old when he played an Ewok in Return of the Jedi, and I got to tell him how special that was for me. And I mean, look, his career is absolutely incredible, the range of characters that he's gotten to play. But I think now that I'm doing Star Wars, I have a new appreciation for like, oh my gosh, how magical it would have been to be 11 years old on a Star Wars set.
Yeah, he was a lucky kid for sure.
Talk about,
we're gonna have to share that with Colleen.
That's
Well, I'll have to find. I know that there's a good handful of photos from one of those first conventions, because obviously Jack had met you, but like AJ and I were also in attendance. Matt was not, but we were also in attendance, and we missed you by like that much. We were just like in the other direction. I have I have a wonderful photo. I'll post it later of you looking in one direction and AJ is literally just looking the other way. You guys are like right next to each other.
I was stressed out or something.
And I'm
I
like,
didn't know what was going on.
Conventions are a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll have to find all of those. So we'll share them up later.
So we can confirm the fur that the armorer wears is not Ewok, right?
No.
Oh, wow.
It is not
Of course
Ewok.
Matt goes there.
Yeah.
I love that though. Like everyone we ask, they say like, "Oh, Empire Strikes Back" or whatever. But I love like Ewok Adventures. Like that's such a good answer. I love that.
Respect. That's a deep cut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that from here, I want to do a little bit of a wrap up because we have gone way over our normal time, but it's all good. Thank you so much, Emily. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on and chat with us right after the finale. And we can't compliment you enough on the amazing job this season. And just thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Truly.
And we will grab all of your information as well for the Voices Against Cancer for all your upcoming streams. And we'll drop all of those links. And is there anything else that you wanted to add before we fully sign off tonight?
I'm trying to think if I'm supposed to say anything. Nope.
All right. That's fine. Don't need to. In proper armorer fashion, sometimes it's a little bit less words, and we understand. It's all good. But yes, thank you so much. Thank you guys so much for chatting with us tonight. Thank you to everyone in the chat for being here and hanging out with us tonight. This was an incredible stream to end the season with. I can't believe Mando Season 3 is over. You can find everything for Hollow Nut Marauders on the social media accounts at Hollow Nut Marauders. That's where we'll be. And I do have a special outro for the end of this season. Oh no, we have way too many memes saved. Hang on. Oh boy, way too many memes. That's not what it is. But perfect. I got it. Okay, cool. Thank you everybody so much for joining us this season, and we'll be back in a couple weeks with more Star Wars content. Thank you again, Emily, for joining us tonight, and we'll see you guys next time. This was really fun. See you guys next time on the Hollow Nut Marauders podcast.
We're here to talk about the Mandalorian.
Oh, guys. We nailed that. We nailed that.
I was just going to say, Alex kept saying that it was taking his juices, and I was like, stop saying that, it's so gross.
Well,
it didn't look like blood.
What? It looked yellow.
Yeah. She's evil. Like, nobody watches a guy getting, his mind wiped eating a biscuit like that, so...
So sinister.
I don't care who I work for, I just want to see people suffer.
I thought there was a little bit of tension. A little bit of romantic tension. Between Bo and
Bo's got tension with everybody, right? I mean,
she does. She's just a
like,
saucy lady. Yeah.
Thank you for inviting us for your 100th episode. This is wild.
I don't know how we got to 100. All of a sudden it was like 50, then like 90, and then we're here. Numbers, man.
We got
numbers, man. Controlling him, and it just...
It's like Wallace and Gromit, the wrong trousers.
Yes!
Oh my god! I cannot unsee. It's got the little levers in it.
Yeah.
Oh my god!